I never once mentioned the true nature of Garage 7 to my daughter Lily. As far as she knew, I was just a stubborn, aging mechanic who refused to let go of a dilapidated classic car restoration lot on the industrial outskirts of the city. I certainly never intended to reveal my secrets to Julian, my impeccably tailored, gold-digging son-in-law. Julian genuinely believed I was nothing more than a grease-stained relic of a bygone era. He thought I was an easy mark he could manipulate and bleed dry. Welcome back to Dad's real-life revenge. Grab a drink, get comfortable, and remember a universal truth. The people in these stories always had the opportunity to walk the straight and narrow path. They simply chose the crooked one instead. Drop a number 1 in the comments below and hit that subscribe button. You are going to love how this one ends. Thunder rattled the corrugated steel roof of the restoration shop, the torrential rain hammering down like a barrage of heavy artillery. I sat alone in my dimly lit office, the air thick with the pungent scent of motor oil and oxidized iron. The pale yellow light illuminated my hands. They were massive, rough, and deeply calloused, cross-hatched with decades of faded scars earned from wrestling with jagged steel. These were the hands of a man who had spent 40 years taking broken things apart. And these exact same hands knew precisely how to systematically dismantle a human being who had outlived his usefulness. The sudden shrill ring of the landline sliced through the pounding storm. I picked up the heavy receiver on the other end. The voice of my night watchman, Elias, came through in a tense whisper. Silas, they just arrived, 3 of them. Rolling in a blacked-out SUV, they're currently using industrial bolt cutters on the heavy chains securing Garage 7. The guy leading the pack is Julian. He brought 2 heavy hitters with him, and they are definitely packing heat. You want me to dial the local precinct? I leaned back slowly in my battered leather chair. My expression remained entirely impassive. It was the terrifying calmness of a sniper exhaling before pulling the trigger. I shifted my gaze to the security monitors on the far wall. Through the crisp feed of the infrared cameras, I had a perfect view of Julian Montgomery. My beloved son-in-law, a man who possessed impossibly soft, manicured hands, was currently standing in the freezing rain. He was visibly trembling as he white-knuckled the heavy steel bolt cutters and violently snapped the padlock. The parasitic tick had finally crawled blindly into the center of the crosshairs. I tapped a thick finger against the wooden desk. Negative, Elias, stand down. I want you and the perimeter security to completely withdraw. Shut down every proximity sensor and kill the audible alarms. I want to leave the front door wide open for this rat. Let him honestly believe he is the smartest man breathing tonight. Elias hesitated for a fraction of a second before severing the connection. I stood up and walked over to the frosted glass window, overlooking the expansive lot. Julian firmly believed he was mere moments away from laying his soft hands on $20 million worth of untraceable, raw conflict diamonds after accidentally stumbling upon a highly classified transport manifest left on my desk. He had absolutely no idea that every single step he was taking had already been meticulously blueprinted into a trap I had personally designed. A person's true character only exposes itself when submerged in the boiling acid of their own unchecked greed. Tonight I was going to systematically strip away every single polished layer of my son-in-law's expensive disguise until nothing remained but a hollow, rotten frame. Silas, I honestly believe you need to seriously reconsider the acquisition offer I presented to you last week, Julian said. Let's be brutally honest here. Your classic car restoration business is an archaic, outdated grease pit. It is nothing but acres of rusted, toxic junk. This is the era of digital technology and aggressive hedge funds. It is definitively time to sell the Pier 88 garage property and allow me to manage the capital injection. All you have to do is sign the deed over and enjoy your twilight years in luxury. I looked Julian directly in the eyes. I could see the naked, ravenous greed dancing wildly behind his expensive contact lenses. He openly mocked my garage as a graveyard of garbage, possessing no idea that the very garbage he despised was being molded into the exact tomb that would permanently bury his freedom. I took a slow sip of ice water, offered him a faint, ambiguous smile, and answered in a profoundly calm voice. I appreciate your concern, Julian, however. A wise man never sells the engine before he knows exactly what kind of fuel is running through the lines. I will take your generous offer under advisement. It was a deliberately open-ended refusal explicitly designed to plant a tiny, jagged seed of obsessive curiosity deep inside his arrogant mind. 2 weeks later, Julian accelerated his timeline. He brought Lily with him, and marched directly into my home. Julian slammed a stack of legal documents onto my coffee table. "Silas, this is the absolute last opportunity for our family to secure generational wealth," Julian declared. "I have personally finalized the financial acquisition package. Every single legal term is completely ironclad. All you have to do is sign the authorization, granting me full executive authority over the Pier 88 property. If you refuse to sign right now, we will immediately forfeit a $500,000 non-refundable deposit. You cannot allow your archaic selfishness to destroy Lily's future." I didn't touch the documents. Every single page in that stack was a legal bear trap designed to swallow my entire garage whole. I looked at Lily. She genuinely believed I was a foolish old man clinging to an outdated pile of scrap metal. She took a hesitant step forward, her voice choking with emotion. "Dad, please, just listen to Julian this one time. He stayed up for 3 consecutive nights meticulously drafting this financial plan for our family. Why do you constantly have to doubt the man I love?" I slowly reached across the coffee table, placed a single, grease-stained finger on the crocodile leather binding, and firmly pushed the heavy stack of documents back across the polished wood toward Julian. "The garage is not for sale, Julian. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Now take your fraudulent paperwork and get out of my house." That single act of defiance drove Julian's festering obsession directly past its breaking point. Julian had inadvertently revealed the frantic, unhinged desperation of a drowning man. The next morning, I met Detective Arthur Miller, who slid a manila envelope across the table. Page after page of financial records revealed deeply horrifying truths. Julian Montgomery did not own or operate a single legitimate hedge fund. He had recklessly gambled away every single cent of his family's savings through illegal offshore online casinos. Now he owed an enormous, catastrophic debt of nearly $3 million to one of the most notoriously violent organized crime syndicates operating on the eastern seaboard. But what caused my chest to tighten to the point of physical agony came on the final page of the dossier. Julian had systematically, secretly drained every single one of Lily's personal bank accounts. Using the pretense of investment opportunities, he had forged her signature on high-interest, predatory loan documents heavily backed by her business as collateral. My daughter's modest, vibrant art studio was now teetering violently on the precipice of total bankruptcy. Lily knew absolutely nothing about the impending disaster. She still trusted her charming, sociopathic husband implicitly. The volcanic anger inside me condensed into something far colder, far more lethal. Julian had crossed the absolute point of no return. He was actively feeding on my daughter's lifeblood to keep himself breathing. A starving, desperate rat will never hesitate to seize any piece of bait carelessly thrown before him. I was going to give him a compelling reason to risk absolutely everything he had left. With my own 2 hands, I would carefully place the most irresistible bait imaginable, right in the dead center of a heavy steel trap, and wait patiently until he willingly walked himself directly into his own total destruction. The very next day, I executed the first phase of the operation. I called Lily and asked her to come down to my office at the garage to review some old tax documents. I deliberately suggested she have Julian pick her up after his meetings. I knew with absolute certainty that Julian would jump at the excuse to come inside and case the property. Before they arrived, I carefully placed a heavy red-stamped file folder directly in the center of my cluttered desk. The file bore the unmistakable official seal of the Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Division. Inside was a classified, heavily redacted manifest detailing a recent high-profile federal seizure. The document outlined the current storage location of $20 million worth of untraceable, uncut conflict diamonds supposedly confiscated from an international cartel. According to the meticulously forged diagrams within the file, the diamonds were currently concealed deep within the hollowed-out engine block of a rusted 1969 Ford Mustang, secured directly inside Garage 7 at Pier 88. Of course, every single page of the manifest was a flawless forgery. Julian walked into my cramped office wearing his mask of arrogance. I played the part of a tired mechanic. I deliberately stood up and asked Lily to come with me out into the pouring rain to inspect a vehicle. That left Julian completely alone in my office for 10 full minutes. He had no idea that a microscopic camera was mounted into my antique desk lamp. I sat in my pickup truck and opened the live camera feed on my smartphone. The absolute instant the office door clicked shut, Julian lunged toward my desk like a starving predator. He frantically flipped open the file, his pupils dilated massively the moment his eyes locked onto the figure. $20 million in diamonds. Pure, uncontrollable greed violently twisted across his features. His hands trembled so violently that he nearly dropped the folder. He hurriedly pulled out his smartphone and began frantically photographing every single page. He truly believed he had stumbled upon the golden ticket that would erase his mob debts. I quietly switched off the screen. The rat had swallowed the bait. I walked back into the office. Julian had already slipped his phone away and greeted me with exaggerated politeness. But this trap was about putting the toxic core of his personality on display for Lily. Before he left, I pretended to pat him on the shoulder. My calloused fingers quickly slipped a microscopic listening device deep beneath the inner lining of his briefcase. Late the following afternoon, I sat alone in my office. The live audio feed from the listening device streamed directly to my phone. Julian's voice bled through the static. He was desperately negotiating with the cartel loan shark. He frantically described the Pier 88 property and the $20 million hidden in the Mustang. The loan shark sounded deeply suspicious, stating clearly that if Julian failed to deliver the cash by midnight, his men would take Lily as collateral payment. Julian's immediate response made every single drop of blood in my body freeze into solid ice. He let out a cold, utterly emotionless laugh. He casually replied, "Go ahead and deal with my wife if you have to. I literally do not care anymore. Tonight, I'm breaking into Garage 7 with a crew to extract those diamonds. The second I have the stones, I'm chartering a private flight straight to Dubai. Do whatever the hell you want with her. She's completely worthless to me now." I slowly reached up and pulled the earpiece from my ear. The office fell completely, deathly silent. Julian had just enthusiastically signed his own death warrant. He was entirely willing to sacrifice the woman who shared his bed, completely willing to hand my beloved daughter over to violent criminals, simply in exchange for his own selfish freedom. I stood up from my desk and grabbed the heavy keys to my truck. The local weather forecast had issued a severe warning that a massive storm would hit the coast tonight. I had to go pick up Lily immediately before that desperate rat realized he had already permanently lost his final human shield. Later that night, the rain poured down relentlessly. The sky was as black and impenetrable as spilled ink. I drove my heavy pickup truck through the deeply flooded streets, heading straight for Lily's house. I called her on the way, keeping my voice tightly controlled. I lied, telling her there was a catastrophic plumbing failure at her art studio and that I needed her to come with me immediately. Lily sprinted out to the truck, panic written clearly across her beautiful face. She had absolutely no idea what was truly about to happen. I did not utter a single syllable during the tense, terrifying drive. As we approached the desolate industrial outskirts bordering Pier 88, I completely killed the headlights. I parked the truck in a pitch-black corner heavily concealed behind towering mountains of rusted shipping containers. From our elevated vantage point, we had a clear, unobstructed view of the entire west gate leading to Garage 7. Lily looked out the passenger window, immediately recognized the location, and turned toward me, her face contorted in profound confusion. She nervously asked why I had dragged her to the freezing garage. I did not answer her question. Instead, I quietly reached out and switched on the heavy-duty tactical tablet securely mounted to the center console. The bright screen instantly connected to the infrared security network positioned outside the gates, simultaneously linking to the audio feed streaming from the listening device, still hidden inside Julian's briefcase. Only a few agonizing seconds later, a blacked-out SUV slowly rolled to a stop in the mud. 3 heavy figures stepped out into the driving rain. The man leading the group carried a massive pair of industrial bolt cutters. The infrared camera illuminated his face with terrifying clarity. It was Chadwick Julian Montgomery. The 2 massive men flanking him were dressed entirely in black tactical gear and were visibly holding suppressed firearms. Lily let out a sharp, horrifying gasp. She immediately reached for the door handle, ready to jump out of the truck to stop him. I immediately placed my massive, calloused hand firmly on her shoulder. The sheer physical weight of a lifelong mechanic's hand kept her securely pinned to the seat. I motioned sternly for her to remain absolutely silent and pointed a thick finger toward the screen right as the audio feed kicked in. Julian's voice pumped through the truck's surround speakers. crystal clear and chillingly ruthless. He aggressively ordered the men to hurry up and snap the hardened lock. One of the hired guns hesitated, asking Julian if he was absolutely certain about the intel, and pointing out that this violent robbery would undoubtedly put his wife in lethal danger. Julian answered in a voice so profoundly cold and utterly devoid of humanity that it was physically revolting to hear. "Forget about her," Julian spat into the rain. "By tomorrow morning, I'll be sipping champagne in Dubai with the Stones. Lily's life isn't worth a single, pathetic penny compared to what's sitting inside that garage. Let the cartel have her." Lily completely froze. Her entire body began violently trembling against the leather seat. Devastated tears streamed down her cheeks. She was overwhelmed by the unbearable pain of the ultimate betrayal. The charming husband was a soulless monster, willing to sell her to murderers to save himself. Lily collapsed back into the passenger seat, buried her face in her hands and sobbed. I sat silently, watching my daughter fall apart. The pain cut through me, yet my face remained calm. I knew this excruciating poison was the only cure for her blindness. Down in the mud, Julian was now aggressively approaching the massive reinforced steel door of Garage 7. He genuinely believed he was mere seconds away from claiming unimaginable, world-altering wealth. He had absolutely no idea that there was not a single, microscopic diamond waiting for him inside. What patiently awaited him beyond that heavy steel door was a permanent death sentence, with absolutely zero chance of escape, a sentence I had personally, meticulously designed with my own two hands. Lily's agonizing sobs were swallowed by the violent roar of the storm raging outside the truck. I gently placed a hand on my daughter's trembling shoulder, offering silent comfort, while my eyes remained locked onto the glowing surveillance screen. On the high-definition monitor, Julian and his two heavily armed accomplices had successfully breached the perimeter. They were now standing directly in front of the massive steel sliding doors of Garage 7. Julian frantically pulled a soaked paper diagram from his designer jacket pocket. He rapidly punched the 6-digit access code into the heavy electronic keypad mounted on the brick wall. A series of sharp mechanical beeps echoed through the driving rain. A metallic click resonated loudly. The massive steel door slowly slid open on its greased tracks. Excitement bordering on unhinged madness rapidly spread across Julian's face. His carefully manicured hands visibly trembled as he forcefully shoved the heavy door open the rest of the way and boldly stepped inside. The two armed thugs followed close behind, raising their suppressed weapons in a tactical sweep. The sprawling interior of Garage 7 was pitch black, smelling faintly of old rubber and damp concrete. Julian quickly switched on his smartphone's high-powered LED flashlight, frantically sweeping the narrow beam across the enormous room in desperate search of the rusted 1969 Ford Mustang and its hidden cargo of diamonds. But before his eyes could even adjust to the darkness, the entire garage violently erupted into blinding, agonizing light. It was not the soft glow of ordinary shop fixtures. It was an intricate network of high-intensity, military-grade halogen floodlights mounted aggressively in all four corners of the soaring ceiling, igniting simultaneously. The sheer, blinding brightness forcefully blinded Julian and his accomplices, forcing them to shield their eyes as they staggered backward in complete disorientation. At that exact moment, a piercing, deafening tactical alarm erupted, shaking the very foundation of the building. This was not the cheap wiring alarm of a private, run-down classic car restoration shop. It was a highly specialized, federally monitored tactical breach siren. From behind the reinforced, disguised concrete walls, dozens of heavily armored federal agents wearing thick Kevlar body armor burst into the center of the room. The unforgiving barrels of their tactical assault rifles were instantly trained directly on the heads of the three intruders. A booming command thundered through the cavernous garage. United States Marshals, drop your weapons. Get on your knees immediately. Move a single muscle and we will open fire. The two hardened cartel thugs accompanying Julian possessed enough survival instinct to recognize a completely unwinnable scenario. They instantly dropped their firearms, raised their empty hands high above their heads, and threw themselves flat onto the damp concrete floor. The heavy industrial bolt cutters slipped completely from Julian's weakened grip, clanging loudly against the solid concrete. Every single trace of color rapidly drained from his handsome face. He stammered incoherently, his jaw working uselessly. His legs shook so violently that he could barely remain standing. As his vision finally adjusted to the intense lighting, he looked desperately around the massive warehouse. There was no rusted 1969 Ford Mustang anywhere in sight. There was not a single crate or bag containing $20 million worth of conflict diamonds. Instead, row upon row of heavily reinforced steel cages held massive stacks of confiscated cartel weaponry, thousands of pounds of seized narcotics, and mountains of illicit currency securely wrapped in thick plastic. The horrifying apocalyptic twist struck Julian with the concussive force of a runaway freight train. Garage 7 was never a dusty storage facility. It was a highly classified, heavily fortified United States Marshals Joint Evidence Holding Facility, perfectly disguised behind the rusting facade of Pier 88. What Julian never bothered to learn was that before I became a simple mechanic, I spent 25 years as a senior logistics commander for federal law enforcement. I personally designed the extreme security infrastructure protecting Garage 7. He had officially committed a maximum-level federal felony. He had willingly walked himself directly into a heavily armed federal fortress, from which there would be absolutely zero escape. From inside the dark cab of the pickup truck, Lily stared silently at the glowing screen. The excruciating emotional pain in her tear-filled eyes gradually gave way to overwhelming, paralyzing horror as she watched a small army of government agents aggressively surround and subdue her husband. I slowly opened the heavy door of the pickup truck. My calloused hands firmly gripped the handle of a large black umbrella. I turned toward my devastated daughter, my voice remaining reassuringly calm. "It's time for us to go watch this rat struggle in the mud." I held the wide umbrella carefully over Lily as we walked slowly into the blazing light of Garage 7. The sharp sound of our footsteps echoed across the damp concrete floor in heavy beats. In the center of the warehouse, Julian was forced onto his knees. His manicured hands were locked tightly behind his back in cold steel handcuffs. His expensive suit was soaked with rainwater and caked in dirt. But his greatest humiliation lay directly beneath him. Terrified by the federal agents pointing weapons at his chest, Julian's bladder had completely failed him. A large stain pooled pathetically on the concrete. He violently trembled like a cornered dog, tears streaming down his face. The absolute moment he saw Lily and me walk calmly through the heavy steel doors, a desperate spark of false hope flashed across his terrified eyes. He pathetically struggled forward on his bruised knees toward us, his voice violently twisted with panic as he cried out, "Lily, please baby, you have to save me. Silas, please help me, I was completely set up. Lily, please tell these agents who I am. I'm your husband." Lily slowly stopped exactly 3 steps away from him. She looked directly down at the broken, weeping man, kneeling pathetically in his own filth on the floor. Not a single additional tear fell from her beautiful eyes. The excruciating pain of his ultimate betrayal had permanently transformed into something incredibly cold and powerful, complete, unadulterated disgust. Seeing the pathetic puddle spreading beneath him, witnessing the absolute naked cowardice he displayed when completely stripped of his arrogant lies, Lily finally realized exactly how terribly blind she had been to trust such a hollow, worthless man. She stared into his desperate, pleading eyes for 5 agonizing seconds. Then, without offering him a single word of comfort, without granting him a single fleeting glance of pity, she slowly turned her back on him and walked away. One of the senior federal agents, a man I had worked closely with for nearly a decade, walked over to me and nodded deeply with profound, unspoken respect. I silently motioned with a calloused finger for them to take the garbage out. 2 massive agents aggressively hauled Julian roughly to his feet, ignoring his pathetic cries, and dragged him forcefully toward the federal transport vehicle, waiting outside in the freezing rain. He never stopped screaming Lily's name in absolute, unhinged desperation until the heavy steel doors slammed shut, sealing his fate forever. The following morning, Lily and I sat together in the quiet familiarity of my cramped garage office. The violent storm had completely passed. The only remaining sound was the soft, rhythmic dripping of rainwater falling from the steel eaves. The wound Julian had inflicted upon my daughter was exceptionally deep. She had lost her marriage, her trust, and her beloved art studio currently teetering on the absolute brink of total financial collapse due to his forged, predatory loans. I stood up slowly from my battered chair and reached behind the antique, framed blueprint hanging on the cracked plaster wall. The time had finally arrived to place the final, most important key into my daughter's hands. The true, lasting inheritance a quiet father had painstakingly prepared long ago in order to permanently protect his own flesh and blood. I gently placed a heavy antique oak lockbox squarely on the center of my desk. Lily looked up, a beautiful clarity having finally returned to her brown eyes. I slowly slid the heavy oak box across the desk toward my daughter. Inside the box rested a thick, neatly organized stack of legal documents and a heavy, solid black titanium bank card. This is the secret, irrevocable trust fund I carefully established for you nearly 10 years ago. Lily, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It was built entirely from the legitimate, hard-earned profits of my classic car restorations. It is completely independent, heavily fortified, and protected by the absolute highest level of legal confidentiality. No one, absolutely not even your treacherous husband, ever possessed the legal authority to touch a single cent of it. The capital secured inside this trust is more than enough for you to immediately pay off every single predatory debt tied to your art studio, and to build a brand new life standing on a much stronger foundation. Lily stared down at the documents, her hands trembling. Then she threw herself across the desk, burying her face deep into my chest and bursting into heavy tears. These tears were no longer shed for Julian's sickening betrayal. They were pure, cleansing tears of profound gratitude and deep remorse. She finally realized that while she had been so easily manipulated by a polished conman's sweet, empty words, this rough, grease-stained old father had quietly remained standing firmly behind her all along. He had aggressively used his scarred hands to meticulously weave the strongest safety net possible for her life. I tightly embraced my beautiful daughter. The bright morning sunlight began shining brilliantly through the frosted glass window. Outside in the expansive yard, the rusted steel chassis of the classic cars glistened beautifully beneath the rising sun. Steel may inevitably rust with the passage of time, but the foundational values of a real family never waver, never bend, and never break in the face of any violent storm. Life is unfortunately filled with parasitic people, exactly like Chadwick Julian Montgomery. They expertly use polished appearances and extravagant promises to effectively conceal the terminal decay and boundless greed rotting within their souls. They arrogantly look down on honest, hard-working people. They foolishly mistake the quiet, observant silence of those who came before them for pathetic weakness. What they tragically fail to understand is that the terrifying calmness of a deeply experienced man is never weakness. It is pure strength accumulated over a lifetime of survival. It is the careful preparation required for delivering the decisive blow when the final line has officially been crossed. Never underestimate a man who spends his entire life building an empire from scratch. He knows precisely how to permanently dispose of the toxic garbage that violently threatens the safety of his family. Always stay hyper-alert when unexpected fortunes magically appear before you, and never turn your back on the fiercely loyal people who stood silently beside you through the hardest of times. True family and unshakable self-respect are the only things in this world that can never be given a price tag. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Dad's Real-Life Revenge. If you appreciated witnessing this spectacular, flawless dismantling of a parasite, please do not forget to share your own story down in the comments section below. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't ever miss the next valuable, hard-earned lesson. Until next time, keep your hands dirty and keep your foundation strong. See you in the next video.